We now join CBS Nightwatch, already in progress.
To those who supported me, I will try to be worthy of your trust. And to those who did not, I will try to earn it. And my hand is out to you, and I want to be your president, too. And I've traveled many miles and reached for many hands, and it's occurred to me that what we were having, the people of America and I, was a conversation, a back and forth, a mutual dialogue, and it cannot go away, not now, not when I need it most. And so I mean to keep the conversation going, to keep walking toward you, talking with you, and reaching for the hands. And another thing, I'll do my level best to reach out and work constructively with the United States Congress. Once in days that were a little darker, I made a promise, and now I'll keep it. Thank you, New Hampshire. Thanks for everything, and God bless America. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
George Bush celebrating his victory in 1988 as he prepares for the transition period leading to his inauguration as the President of the United States. We have much more on this election. Back in a moment.
None of us can forget someone very important. And I hope he's listening right this moment, because we did win one for the Gipper.
Hold the hash browns.
You wake up in the morning, your hurt real bad.
Here you go.
We'll see you, Gina.
Bye, Billy Ray. Let me have 2 eggs over here.
Eugene, great biscuits.
Hey, how you doing?
One out of every 5 people who try cocaine get hooked. But that's not your problem. Or is it?
Red tape kills in times of disaster by delaying life-saving medicines from getting off the ground. AmeriCares cuts through red tape. We rush relief to earthquake-torn El Salvador, the volcano-ravaged Colombia, to Poland after Chernobyl, because in times of disaster, time lost means lives lost. Help AmeriCares cut through red tape. Together, we'll get it there.
That's it. I'm history. End of the road.
You can't quit, Vince. No crash dummy takes out a utility pole like you do.
Larry, for years I've been proving how safety belts save lives, but nobody's listening.
Sure they are.
Yeah, that's why thousands die in car accidents every year. I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall.
Come on, Vince. Tomorrow's the big day. 2 compacts. Head on.
High speed?
Could save a life.
No, I'll be there.
Yeah.
You could learn a lot from a dummy. Buckle your safety belt.
America was born of the sea and grew along her rivers and lakes. Ships brought her the goods and people to build a nation. A few of these great sailing ships and paddle boats remain to keep alive for us the lore and skills of another age. But like other valuable things from our past, they must be cared for and maintained. Lend a hand in protecting our national maritime heritage. Support maritime preservation in your community. Don't give up the ships.
Republican George Bush has received a mandate from the majority of American voters. We want to look now at the fine print in that mandate. Who are these Bush supporters who flooded to the polls, and what are they betting a Bush-Quayle administration will do for them? 2 people who have been here throughout the campaign are back with us. Longtime political observer Alan Barron, publisher of the Barron Report, joins us. Also here, Fred Barnes, a senior editor of the New Republic magazine. The 2 of them will continue to be with us throughout the evening. From New York for this segment, Kathy Frankovic. She is director of surveys for CBS News, and she has the latest numbers. Well, Kathy, just give me some guidance in terms of who the Bush... Why did it turn out the way it did? And are there any surprises in terms of the Bush majority?
Well, I think that, if anything, we might have guessed this a little bit earlier than we did. The economy mattered to a lot of voters, and they were generally pretty happy with the way things are going. Nearly half the voters told us that they think things are better in the United States than they were in 1980. Those voters voted overwhelmingly for the Bush-Quayle ticket. So that, in a sense, what we had was an affirmation of the status quo. Voters saying things are pretty good, we like the Reagan administration, and we want it to continue.
Well,
Fred?
Kathy, you know, one of the things that surprised me during the election was exactly on that issue that you're talking about, how voters feel about the economy, and it was the amazing shift that happened between roughly August and September, when voters went from being pessimistic about the economic future to optimistic. I never really understood why they shifted then.
Well, you know, I think a lot was happening with the way voters looked at the administration. As we got closer to the election, what people were thinking in terms of the Reagan administration was sort of very retrospective. It really is an 8-year evaluation at that point. It's not an evaluation of day-to-day, so it's an 8-year evaluation of the state of the economy. That's not to say there still isn't a lot of concern out there. Nearly half the voters tell us they're worried about the economic future. And that's pretty much underscores some of the other differences that we find. There's a gender gap among the voters. There's a gender gap with women just moderately supporting Dukakis, men favoring George Bush. Women are pessimistic. Men are optimistic about the future.
Alan.
Kathy, a question on polls, you know. We've been through, we saw Dukakis' tremendous 17-point lead disappear. But we saw the same thing happen when Dewey was leading Truman, and Carter was leading Ford by a massive majority, and Carter ended up winning, but only won by 1 point. Do you think there's a difference between people's answers in the polls a few months out of an election in which they're asked about an election that's in the abstract, in a distance, would you like a change? And the difference is that then when they finally go in the voting booth and have to decide whether or not they want to change, they seem to go back and vote much more like they did the previous time, and much more to maintain the status quo. So don't you think that the polls, maybe, while they were accurate, still people aren't answering them like they're voting when Dukakis was so far ahead last summer?
Well, I think back to 1980, when even a week before the election, people were thinking a different way from the way they thought when they walked into the polling booth. There's something very real about pulling a lever or punching out a punch card or putting a check mark on a paper ballot that isn't real when someone calls you up. The other thing that happens with the polls is that it's not your choice, really, to participate in a telephone survey. The stranger is calling you up, is asking you questions about issues. People answer legitimately and truthfully, but they may not have been thinking the same way that they think come November 8th, or whenever it is in November.
Let me talk about a couple of things that were part of the conversation of this campaign. The Democrats feel like there was a lot of negative campaigning, and they feel that George Bush did a very good job in painting Michael Dukakis as A, a liberal, B, soft on defense, C, soft on crime. Did the negative commercials, the negative campaigning make a difference and so paint Michael Dukakis that it affected the voters?
Oh, I think it did. I think it did two things. It made two things an issue. One, it made Dukakis' liberalism an issue. And secondly, it made crime an issue in a national presidential campaign. And crime really hadn't been part of the national political discussion since, I guess, 1970, maybe 1972, when Democrats were called candidates of acid amnesty and abortion. Right. So I think that it was successful in focusing on certain items that voters might not have paid attention to otherwise. But I think something else happened. We found in our survey that 28% of the voters said that one of the factors that mattered most was Dukakis' liberal views. What was interesting is that an awful lot of liberals were checking that, and it's almost as if after enough liberal bashing, those liberals that are left out there sort of decided to become very feisty and and rally round their candidate. So frankly, those people who said Dukakis' liberalism mattered to them actually voted for the Democrats.
Yeah, one of the things the Bush campaign did very well was create sort of a caricature of liberalism in Mike Dukakis. They picked out exactly the issues they wanted. It was Willie Horton and the furlough program, the membership in the ACLU, the death penalty, and so on, the Pledge of Allegiance. and use those to symbolize Dukakis. I don't think they used them to make him appear unpatriotic, but they did make him appear like he's some Massachusetts liberal totally out of sync with the rest of the country, and it worked pretty well.
Kathy, I noticed an interesting thing, and I don't know if it shows up demographically, but if you look at the overall national figures, it looks like Dukakis ran 6 points or so ahead of Walter Mondale. But that doesn't look like it's a very uniform sort of thing. If you go to states like Vermont and Wisconsin and Washington and Oregon and Iowa, that northern tier states, he seems to be doing disproportionately better than in states like Maryland and West Virginia and Tennessee. Demographically, was the Dukakis vote, was it an upscale vote? Did he do better than with college-educated people? Did he do better with younger, upwardly mobile people?
There are a couple of points here that really they stood out. They were a big surprise. Younger voters, those under 30, in the polls, we've been seeing them almost 2-to-1 for George Bush in the last few weeks. They ended up voting for Bush, but very, very narrowly. Secondly, there seemed to be this education clique that was supporting Dukakis, again narrowly, but supporting Dukakis. Teachers voting for Dukakis, students voting for Dukakis, and when you get to the very top of the educational ladder, not the college graduates, because they went heavily for George Bush, but those people who had some graduate training, you found Dukakis doing very well with them. And it's kind of interesting to see that in fact you might call these people progressive or that you're upscale.
So it was kind of the reverse of when Bush was sending one message to the policemen in Boston, he was sending another message to the people in small towns in Vermont.
I think so. I think so.
Let me take a break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
And tonight, my heart is filled with gratitude to everyone who has made this extraordinary experience of ours possible. From my friends and neighbors here in Massachusetts to those 3,000 people who were waiting for us at 3 o'clock this morning in Des Moines, Iowa.
If you're an inventor, you have a very special talent. Inventors create new ways. They launch their dreams and make them a reality. The Innovation Center of Washington, D.C. helps an inventor research, develop, and present a new idea to industry. For free information explaining the invention process, dial 1-800-228-6000. Every new product starts with just an idea. So take that first step. Call the Innovation Center.
I'm Cy Sperling, president of the Hair Club for Men, and these are just a few of the men who called our toll-free number for our booklet about thinning hair. This is the booklet that tells you what you need to know about every hair replacement method available. It discusses everything, from toupees and wigs to transplants and weaves, and it even has a section on the realities and misconceptions of minoxidil. Just call our toll-free number now, and I'll send you our new updated edition, which includes a whole new series of before and after photos like these. These men are actual clients and not models. They're men like you who discovered that you don't need drugs or chemicals, surgery or miracles to have a full head of hair. To get all the facts free and without obligation, just call our toll-free number now, and I'll send you the new booklet. And remember, I'm not only the Hair Club president, but I'm also a client.
Everything you bake, sticky muffins you make, even gooey cake turns out great. Baker's Secret Non-Stick, it's the baker's trick. Baker's Secret Non-Stick Bakeware solves your stickiest baking problems. It's Baker's Secret.
The tall ships, a symbol of our American heritage. Help keep them alive to teach us the lore and skills of another age. Support maritime preservation efforts in your community. Don't give up the ships.
We're back. Kathy Frankovic, Director of Surveys for CBS News in New York, has been tracking through a whole series of polls throughout the campaign season, and with tracking polls and exit polls today, she has looked at voters and why they voted the way they did. What about ethnic breakdowns? I understand that I saw one one survey that said George Bush was doing very well with the UAW, for example. Did he do well with working men and women across the country, and especially with union members?
No. Union members came back to their traditional Democratic roots. About 60% of union members and those who live in households that have union members voted for the Democrats. That's about as well as Walter Mondale did, who had very strong labor ties. I think that something we shouldn't forget is there was an awful lot of talk in this campaign about how certain groups would desert the Democrats. The black voters wouldn't come out and vote for Michael Dukakis. Republicans were trying to make inroads with Hispanic voters. That didn't happen. George Bush got perhaps 10%, 11% of the votes cast by blacks in this election. That's not a whole lot better than Ronald Reagan did 4 years ago. Reagan got 9% of the black vote. So Dukakis did very well there. Dukakis did even better than Walter Mondale, who's by far a more traditional Democrat, among Hispanic voters. He got nearly 3/4 of those voters, and that's better than Mondale. So that those core Democratic voters were still there.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're saying
Catholics.
Catholics split about evenly, narrowly to Bush. Jews by 2-to-1 supported Dukakis.
Did they say why?
Pretty much the same issues. Liberalism mattered to them.
I think they were not too crazy about Dan Quayle as well, Jewish voters. But it sounds like what you're saying, Kathy, is that while core Democrats came back, it's a smaller core than it used to be.
That's right. I mean, if you look at Walter Mondale 4 years ago, who voted for him? Well, he got blacks, Hispanics, and Jews, and labor union members, but narrowly. That's not a whole lot of people. Dukakis really did do better. He kept those people, and he did do better than Mondale with really most every single other group.
What are you projecting the final the percentage will be? Something like 53-47?
I think so. I think people are waiting until we get more of the vote counted from the West Coast. As we saw throughout the night, the first votes that actually got counted had a much wider Bush lead than what we seem to be ending up with. We are getting close to 50.
Let me ask one more question. After seeing these maps on television tonight, all going to in the Bush column, regionally, where is the Democratic base now?
Well, you know, it's a mixture, I think. It's a funny mixture, because what it seems to be is core Midwest, core Northeast, and then the Pacific Coast as part of some potential future Democratic strength. Someone was looking at it and looking at the little strips of blue and saying, gee, you know, might think of those states as progressive states. You know, might think of those states as sort of well-educated, well-off states. That's a new kind of Democratic Party. I think one of the things, the reason it looks so red is that Republican states tend to be just bigger geographically.
What about undecided voters who went into the election day undecided? How did they break?
Well, you know, we saw the movement towards Dukakis in the last week or so, and that's exactly what happened. Those undecided voters split for Dukakis by about 3-2.
Hey, let me ask something, you know, that I've always wondered about. You all take these polls with and people can list very intricate reasons why they voted for someone. Are you convinced that voters really know the reason why they voted for somebody? I mean, they'll check something in a box, but do they really know?
Well, I think they're perfectly capable of verbalizing their likes and dislikes about candidates, and I think that's what voting does. It forces you to not just say I'm for this person, but to have some rationale for it. It's not a random choice. Voting never is truly random, although I think sometimes we like to think it is.
Alan, anything?
Kathy, I was going to say that sometimes the reasons too may be often excuses. We have trouble, you know, in politics in separating a cause and effect. And so asking someone why they voted for Bush and them mentioning the Pledge of Allegiance or the furlough, maybe 200 years ago when Mr. Jefferson ran and the president of Yale University called on all women to bury their Bibles because Jefferson was a heathen, the first Democratic president, and an apostle of reason, they called him. Maybe it's just different words, you know, like you said, amnesty, acid, and abortion. I mean, the Democrats have been the out party in that sense for a couple hundred years.
Let me jump in with one last question. We've only got less than a minute. The Quayle factor, what influence on the vote?
Vice presidential candidates mattered more this year than they did in 76, 80, or 84. But still, they were important to only 15% of the voters. Those people went heavily for the Democrats. I think the quail factor may have mattered in some of the very, very close states that Dukakis carried.
Thank you very much, Kathy. I know it's been a long day for you and a long season. Thank you for joining us for all these times, and especially this evening.
Thank you.
We'll be back with Fred Barnes and Alan Barron, and we'll talk about the Senate later in this broadcast. Nightwatch continues. Stay with us.
What are the three biggest lies in the world? Smoking is relaxing. Smoking is glamorous. And lung cancer won't happen to me. This year, 125,000 Americans learned the truth about smoking when they were diagnosed with lung cancer. November 17th is the Great American Smokeout. Quit for the day or quit for life, but do it. Because this is a pack of lies.
I have your attention. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I,
Alan Wang,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution, if it's important enough to fight for, don't you think it's important enough to know about? The Constitution, the words we live by.
When the night has come, no, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh.
Call the Alzheimer's Association. We're here to stand by you.
Come on, Nightwatch. Will it be Jackson in 92? Looking back at McGovern in 72. And a prediction of taxes from Republican lips. How's the Senate shaping up? And 13 points for picking an American leader. Now in Washington, here is CBS News correspondent Charlie Rose.
Welcome back. George Bush is the first sitting vice president in 150 years to ascend to the presidency by popular election. Bush enters the White House under the rallying cry of 4 more years, and his victory dashes the hopes of Democrats to break a Republican hold on the Oval Office unmatched in 4 decades. With the majority of the nation's precincts reporting, Bush held steady at 54% of the vote and Dukakis at 46%. In Senate races, Democrats fought a bloody fight to gain more than their present 54 to 46 majority. For George Bush and Michael Dukakis, it has been a long and grueling campaign. Some say it was unmatched in recent history in its nastiness, but in their final election night speeches, both candidates stressed unity.
And you can't help but be moved when your country endorses your hopes and your candidacy.
Kitty and I and our family can't even begin to express Our gratitude to you and to hundreds of thousands of people like you across this country who have given so much to us.
Former presidential candidate Jesse Jackson has been there every step of the way in this campaign. He had some moments with Democrat Michael Dukakis early on, but in the past few months, Jackson has campaigned hard for the Democratic ticket. He has established himself in this campaign as a national political leader, and apparently it will not stop here. He has been quoted as saying that the new political season for Democrats starts today, Wednesday, the day after the Republicans took the presidency. Joining us now from Chicago, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Welcome.
Good to be with you again, Charlie.
Where do we go from here? What do you do now? What does the Democratic Party do now?
I think what's appropriate now is for us is to give strong congratulations to Mike Dukakis for running a gallant, effective, and integrous campaign, and appropriately congratulate President-elect George Bush once that becomes official. And then to search for some common ground legislative agenda. The fact is the TV ads are behind us now. The Willie Horton story is behind us now. The 650,000 family farmers abandoned is in front of us now. Bombed out urban America, drugs flowing in, jobs flowing out. Those are challenges that face us now. When Mr. Bush talked about a kind and gentler nation, I hope Democrats and Republicans alike can find common ground on such an agenda. Lastly, I would think that there is this real concern now that we accept the fact that George Bush will be president, but Democrats have gained in the Senate and gained in the House, which means our party is strong and viable. Thus, we need not be finger-pointing. We need simply cut our losses, protect our gains, and move on.
What are the lessons to be learned from the campaign that just concluded?
It may be a little premature to talk about the lessons to be learned. I'll leave that at this point to the analysts and maybe to Mr. Dukakis' staff. As for me, I'm concerned that our party, in fact, have a minimum amount of bloodletting, that our challenge is not to see which group will conquer the other, but to coalesce, to maximize our strengths, and keep expanding our voter base, keep expanding voter registration, and keep humane priorities on the nation's agenda.
What do we know?
We must be the party by whatever definition, call it liberal if you will, call it conservative, but basically be about equal rights for women, basically be about stop drugs from coming in and stop jobs from going out.
There are a lot of Democrats who are waking up on Wednesday morning saying, if we had had a more conservative candidate, a more moderate candidate that was strong on defense and that had a different approach to some of these issues, for example, Lord Benson is one that they suggest the Democrats would have done a lot better. That liberalism suffered egregious defeat in this election.
Well, you can't very well say that it's about liberalism or conservatism. It may be about strength of leadership and perception, not so much about packaging. The fact of the matter is, voters are saying today that they want daycare. They want health care. They want to clean up the environment. They want to expand government services to protect the homeless and the abandoned. Well, that is a liberal, progressive agenda.
They also seem to be saying they want no new taxes, they want cuts in spending, and they want to build these additional weapon systems that George Bush is in favor of.
Well, but some polls are showing quite the opposite, Charlie. They're showing that people do not mind paying more taxes if those taxes are used to clean up our environment, if they're used to educate our children. And so I'm convinced 8 years after Mr. Reagan and Bush, we have bigger government, but fewer human services. And now there is obviously going to be a hue and cry across the board for more human services. The fact is, when human beings are not served, it costs us morally, it costs us in productivity, it costs us as a nation in character.
If you could say one thing to George Bush, on behalf of yourself, on behalf of people who voted for you, on behalf of black Americans, what would it be?
It would be that his promise for a kinder and gentler America will be carried out. After all, there are more millionaires 8 years later, but there are 10 million more people in poverty.
There are those who are saying also that, in a sense, this is good for you, this Bush election, because it gives you an opportunity to go across this country and lead the opposition to George Bush. That also you benefited from not being on the ticket, because if the ticket headed by Michael Dukakis, was to lose as bad as it did, some would say part of the reason was Jesse Jackson.
Well, we're talking about what might have been. Let us not look at what could have been if I had been on the ticket. The fact is, I was not. And I campaigned hard for the ticket. I traveled more miles and spoke to more people and registered more voters than any other Democrat, because I believe that I do not gain by Dukakis losing. The fact of the matter is, if Dukakis had prevailed, we would have an Equal Rights Amendment for women, we'd raise minimum wage for workers, we'd have fairer Supreme Court judges, we'd cut contra aid in Central America, we'd have a real commitment to free South Africa. We stood to gain much from a Dukakis-Benson victory, and that's why I worked for them so hard.
I hear what you're saying about the Chicago Sun-Times interview, the interview with Steve Neal, but isn't it fair to say that Wednesday morning marks the first day of Jesse Jackson's journey towards the next Democratic candidacy?
It is not fair to say that, nor is it accurate, nor is that what I said. It is right now premature, downright immature on this night, this morning, to be talking about 1992. There's so much to be done to heal our party, to expand it, to cut our losses, to protect our gains, to look forward to a legislative agenda in 1989. This really is no time to talk 1992 politics. It is a time to talk about humane priorities for those who've been left out of the American dream.